Well, before I get a bunch of hate mail from the title of this video, let me state up front, in case you didn't read the whole title, I do love VR flying. It's my preferred way to fly. You just can't beat the immersion, just the realism. I've used a VR headset, and sometimes when after flying for a while, when I'm sitting on the runway, or I'll take the headset off at the end of a session, and it just takes me just a second for my brain to click and to understand that I'm not really where I thought I was. It's almost a shock, and that's how real it feels. And also the 3D effects are just awesome. So these are the reasons that I love to fly in VR, but there's 5 things that I really don't like about VR, at least in its current state. So I'd like to talk about those in this video, and also give you some solutions probably that either we'll see or I'd like to see in the future. So let's take a look. Today I'm flying the Aerobasque Eclipse the 550 in X-Plane 11, and one of my favorite airplanes, really optimized for VR flying. Now, my first dislike about VR flying is the resolution available in the headsets. If you haven't tried VR flying, it's hard to describe this to you. And the visual images you see on the videos online of people flying VR just aren't realistic, because they're just taking the screen image and putting it up there, but they're not showing you the resolution limitations of the headsets. So what I'd like to do here is show you some footage that I shot through the lens of my VR headset, and try to give you just a rough idea of how it looks. I'm trying to hold an iPhone up against the in the headset and manipulate the headset around isn't an easy thing to do. You can see flicker in the video at times, and that has to do with I think the refresh rate of the iPhone and the headset are not compatible. But it does give you some idea of the resolution, and then from time to time I stop moving this thing enough, you'll get a view. The cool thing is that you can move your head around and look around objects. You can look around. If you can't see over the dash, you can raise your head up a little bit and look over the nose to get that same effect. You can even move your head outside the airplane through the glass if you want. But once you're in the airplane, it's quite realistic. And when I'm not moving here, you can kind of see the quality of the video. It's much better than what you're seeing here, but as you can see, it's not anywhere close to what a modern monitor can do, even an HD monitor. You can see I've used the you can't touch things on screens in the VR, so I've used the you can see I've used the Reality XP GTN 750 and just placed it where that is on the cockpit, and that allows me to use my controller to make inputs to that, which is a great addition to the realism. So as you can see, it's not as clear as we would like, but the 3D effects make it feel so much more realistic, and I think there is some room for improvement, obviously. The good news is this is already working itself out with each iteration and generation of headsets. The Rift S that I'm using here is a far cry better than the original Rift that I had. I've also had a Odyssey Plus, and it was somewhere in the middle. And I think the HP Reverb G2 that's coming out, from what I've seen, is approaching photorealistic, which is what our expectations are. Now the next area for improvement is the headset field of view. How wide a view can you get in the headset? And the human eye has about 180 to 210 degrees field of view, including your peripheral vision. Unfortunately, the headsets only give you about 100 degrees for most of the headsets, although there are a few that are starting to widen that out. This means that it's a bit like looking through a scuba mask. But you do miss out on some of the peripheral view prompts that you might get. But here's about the typical field of view you can see here, and I'll put the the controller, try to show you that where it should go to. If you could see what you could see with your natural field of view, would go from there over to about there. You can see it's quite a bit further, up almost double the width. And this is a loss. The other thing I'll comment here is on the head movements. It looks crazy. It looks like I'm just yanking my head left and right and turning my head all the time. And that's because the headset stays aligned. Your eyes actually are quite good at tracking an object while your head's moving. So your head's moving, but your eyes can stay focused on a specific switch or outside object. And you don't notice this head turning nearly as much as you see here. In fact, you don't notice it hardly at all. And that's why it's so hard to represent the VR experience on a YouTube video. The third area that I don't really like about VR, and this is kind of important for me as a pilot, and that is the use of the controllers. Once you have the controllers in your hand, they work quite well. Here I'll manipulate the GTN 750 from Reality XP, and I can just point the laser pointer there, the controller, and touch those things, squeeze the trigger. They work fine. The problem is I have it in my right hand. When I need to use the throttle or use the flight controls, I have to put that down somewhere. So I want to release the parking brake, I have to pick it up, release it, put it back down someplace where I can find it without any sight and have it ready. Want to set the flaps, same thing. I have to set the flaps down, then put the controller back in my lap somewhere and hope I don't drop it. And this is very unnatural to have to keep picking it up and putting it down. Of course, the answer would be hand tracking, and that's coming along, and I think that will be a possibility. But even with hand tracking, there won't be any sense of touch, and that's lacking also. So for VR to become a viable training aid for real-life aviation, I think there's going to have to be some strides made in this way that the pilot interacts with VR. And we'll talk a little about some of those ideas at the end of the video. Now there's one specific controller input that rates a hate of its own. And number 4 is the dial inputs or knob inputs in VR. You have to reach up with your controller, you have to touch the knob and squeeze the trigger, and that highlights it, and then you have to turn your wrist. Of course, you can't turn your wrist all the way around, so you can only get maybe 180 degrees if you're really good at it. And when you start setting things, well, in the case here, the heading's not a problem because you don't have to turn it that far. But if you're setting an altitude and you're at 5,000 and you want to go to 22,000, you can be turning all day. And most of those buttons have a sync button in the middle, and if you accidentally, when you have to release it to reposition it after half a turn and then turn it again, and when you turn it, if you accidentally hit that sync button, the altitude goes right back to where it was and you have to start all over again. And it's just frustrating as heck, and this is one area that's got to be improved. Now laminar research could make it so that you get some aural feedback, like a click every notch, every degree, every input that you make, and could make small amounts turn, and then large amounts. If you turned it beyond a certain amount and held it, it would start to just increase and roll up and roll down. That would solve the problem. But something has to be done, because this is an immense frustration. Whether it's on this airplane or the Zevo 737, it's just a pain in the rump to try to set those knobs, and it's just not realistic. You can spend 3 or 4 minutes trying to increase the altitude by 15,000 feet in the altitude window. Now some airplanes use sliders. Those have their limitations too, but something needs to be done. Now, I've tried several different techniques. One involved building a little button box that used Arduino and Air Manager so that I could push the button using just tactile feel, and then it would tell me what I've selected, and then I would make and then once I'd made the selection, I could make the input with a knob. Also, the Knobster, we tried making that work with VR, but in that case you have to pick up the controller and select on a list what you want to set, like heading or altitude, and then you can use the knob. And that's a vast improvement, but still, it's not realistic. There needs to be a way to do it with just the glove or just hand only, and to be able to make inputs that are natural and efficient and quick. Sorry about the extended rant, but that's an especially frustrating area that I'd like to see an improvement for. Fifth and final thing I'd like to see improved about VR is a way to share your VR experience with other people. First, if you'd like to let a friend give it a try, you put them under the headset, and then it's very frustrating trying to explain to them how to use menus and to touch things. And it's almost impossible to explain to them when they are under that headset. Normally, you would set someone down next to you in your normal monitor sim, and you can see what they're doing, and you can instruct them along the way. And this is very frustrating, not only for you, but especially for the person who's trying to experience this for the first time. They just don't get a good experience. When using X-Plane, one solution I found is the Control Pad app, which is free from Laminar Research. I did a recent video where I explained how to use Control Pad. And it allows you to control the sim and set everything up. And you can also see the navigation and the views similar to what they see out of the cockpit. So it helps, and it's an improvement. But by and large, the best thing would be able to have shared cockpit where you could, on two different VR rigs, connect up, and one could be the master and run it, and the other person could take over flying from time to time. And hopefully we'll have that at some time in the near future. I have found that by flying a flight and then playing it back in the replay mode in X-Plane allows someone to experience what it looks like and to be able to move their vision around and look and see what's going on without having to fly the airplane. But for someone who wants to instruct, a shared cockpit is definitely what we need. And then it would be able to even instruct someone from remote locations, and that would be really cool. So there are my 5 gripes as a quick recap. The resolution and the field of view, but those will take care of themselves over time. There also needs to be vast improvements in control inputs, and we talked about gloves and hand tracking and things like that, maybe haptic feedback in gloves. And finally, we need shared cockpit or some other way to share the experience of RV flying for instructors and also people just wanting to demo the technology. So if VR flying is going to become a viable training aid for real-life flying and a better experience for simmers, I think the input methods have to be improved. And I had 2 ideas. The first idea is to create a mock-up of an actual cockpit using some kind of method to align the virtual reality and the physical switches, and they could even be dummy switches. But then those switches could be manipulated in the simulator, and that way when a person who could see his hands in VR via hand tracking could reach out and actually touch a physical switch and feel it move, and that would be a very realistic way to train. The second would be to have augmented reality set up where you would have a physical cockpit, and then the image of the outside the cockpit and part of the inside of the cockpit where the switches weren't located could be virtual, and you would have an actual cockpit with functioning switches, much like the cockpits we build now for home cockpits and in real life training cockpits in the airlines and other civil aviation. Think of high resolution pass-through video combined with a green screen of the simulator. If the pass-through video was color, stereo, and high quality, and it was combined with the simulator, it could be quite compelling. Still have the advantages of a physical cockpit. So despite the fact there are some things about VR flying in the sim that I don't like, the good things far outweigh it, and I strongly encourage everyone to give it a try. You know, just like when the internet came along, I waited a couple years to adopt it, thinking, what do I need that for? And I got to admit, initially I felt a little bit that way about VR flying. But now that I've tried it, it's an unbelievably real experience, and it's the funnest way and probably the most effective way to do a lot of training. If we can overcome a few of these little hurdles that I've mentioned, I think the future definitely lies in flying and simming in VR for both fun and training. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you'll like and subscribe. If you're not already, hit the notification bell. And I'd love to hear your comments on ideas that you have to make VR flying better. Let's start a conversation in the comments below. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you again soon on my next video.